I think someone else who might appreciate the revenue sharing model that, of course, 3Tech and Baller Pickleball have pioneered. No one else does that. It's the
Right. Yeah.
NCAA, and they are desperately looking for some way out of this antitrust lawsuit. Seems like rev sharing is the way of the future, gentlemen. Get ready. We are going to be paying athletes like they are on salary. Now, it is interesting to note that at the outset of this, all proposed legislation appears to fall shy of making athletes employees. But you search the NCAA on the search engine of your choice, and there's nothing else about billable hours going up right now. The NCAA apparently staring down the barrel of a $4 billion with a B dollar lawsuit. And it appears like President Charlie Baker is putting all his eggs in one basket, that they want antitrust exemption. They want to somehow find a way to get to this rev sharing model that would maybe push those issues away. Guys, the issue though that comes up when you do a little bit of cursory research, Mr. Baker is attempting to achieve something that no other sports league in the United States has done, save
Mm.
Major League Baseball. The NCAA and fighting battles they have no business winning. That's a tradition as old as time, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they are 0 for what? At least 10
The
now in
world.
court cases related to this, it seems like. And if you wanna be on the right side of history, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely wanna follow Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball.
Yes,
That's definitely the way you wanna go. Now, um, it's very interesting to follow this, and obviously none of us are lawyers, so it's really easy to get lost in the legal mumbo jumbo of all of this, and shout out to those lawyers because they're the real winners in all of this with the billable
absolutely.
hours. But it's just fascinating to follow, and the hoops that I think both sides are gonna have to jump through this are gonna be fascinating to see where the dust settles, because I'm really interested to see, and I might be jumping ahead in the discussion here a little bit, Mitch, and I apologize for that, but I know it's not on paper an employee. I know we're not that's not what that's what a lot of people reported at first, and it looks like that's not, at least on paper, what we're gonna settle at.
Hmm.
But I wonder, is that the best move for student athletes? Do they get treated as well as employees, quote unquote, whatever we want to call them, versus what they are right now? I don't know, honestly. It might be like a careful what you wish for situation, because being an employee takes away a lot of, the just not gray area, but just grace, I guess, that college
Yeah.
athletes. Well, these are amateurs. These are, you'll see people on message boards. These are just kids. When they're an employee of the university or whatever you want to call it, employee without being called an employee, takes away a lot of that grace and a lot of that protection that they may or may not realize that they're getting right now.
Well, and Trey, kind of to your point, the first thing that I thought of when you said that, the whole, employee versus not, was the idea behind, when we kicked up NIL at first, it was kind of a like, it's not performance based, so you couldn't like yank it. That was kind of the big thing, is you couldn't yank it if the guy all of a sudden, transferred, or, played really poorly, or just like wasn't a starter or something like that. You couldn't tie it to performance. I think this opens the door to ask that question if the employee thing ends up happening as well. Employees can be performance based, people, where it's like, oh, if you didn't do so well,
Should
we
be.
can, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you can cut your pay, you can get fired, you can. I mean, does that turn into like losing scholarships? Does that turn into losing your spot on the team if you're just not as good, or like what ends
Right.
up happening with that? I'm curious to see what could happen to that.
And a couple things, because we're not so blind to see. First of all, we're not so blind to say that that's not already happening. We know that that's already happening. We know that these coaches meet with players, especially in the era of the transfer portal. And Dion has been very public about his meetings with players, about how you're not going to cut it, son. You might need to go somewhere else. And we are very pro player on this podcast. I feel like we've done a good job of communicating that in the past. But if you're new around
Yep.
here, we are pro player. We are pro NIL in theory. We're also pro sane NIL. Um, but it does concern me, because these universities are going, lawsuit aside, settlement aside, these universities are going to protect themselves. And you're kidding
Have to.
yourself if you think that they're not going to come out of this with some way to still hold the power in this situation. I know it seems like all this power is going to the players. There's a lot of really smart lawyers on the side of these universities too. And I just really hope that players are doing their homework and being really careful about the agreements that they sign going forward.
Well, I think the thing that gets lost in a lot of this is, Trey, as you mentioned, the universities have to protect themselves, but it's not necessarily out of, oh, well, we're protecting our margins, right? Like we got to make sure that, the rich get richer. For a lot of these universities, it's going to be survival, right? I mean, you're
Mhm.
seeing athletic departments lay off employees in preparation for this revenue sharing model that won't come until 2025 at the absolute earliest per reports. But there's a lot of these major athletic departments that invest in the eighth wonder of the world on campus that also are operating in the red as an athletic department, right? I mean, just to give you the 30,000-foot view, no athletic department makes a profit aside from a booming business with their football team, and for some athletic departments, not all, their basketball team. But in general, almost every other scholarship sport that the university supports is a loss leader, right? That's why you saw Stanford trying to cut something like 20 varsity programs a couple of years ago, even though they were winning national championships in literally all of them. It's because they just can't afford them on the balance sheet. And so, even with some of these big time universities, I'm looking at LSU as a big one, right? They're in the news. They win national championships. Their budget is horrendous, right? I mean, they were quite literally taking money and donations from a local hospital in the area. That is fact, right? If you don't like it, sorry, deal with it. Texas A&M has been running in the red over the last couple of years. That change of leadership, Trev Alvers has ruffled a lot of feathers recently by laying off some senior employees, but when you talk to people in the know, it truly was a numbers decision. They have been running in the red for the last several years, and there's consequences that come with that. You have to right that ship immediately. So at the end of the day, when reports are saying that universities at the highest level are going to have to prepare to absorb a 20 to 30 million dollar expense in
A
rev
year,
sharing per
not just
year
one
per
time either, per
per
year.
year, that certainly raises a lot of red flags and grabs a lot of attention. So I guess my question with all of that is the background is, can college sports survive in a revenue sharing model, or are we about to go to some sort of tiered system where it's kind of based on financial backing?
This is where I think athletes need to be very careful and maybe be careful what they wish for here. Especially, I know we're a college football podcast. I think football players are going to get taken care of because they are the ones that are bringing in the revenue. They have the most clear cut case. If you are a third string men's soccer player, I think you need to be really careful about thinking that this is going to set you up because you're kidding yourself if you think these universities are going to treat the employees equally. Do they pay the chief financial officer the same as the head custodian? Absolutely not. So why would it be any different if we're treating them as employees? The money is not going to work out. I know we feel like these departments can print as much money as they want. We love to pretend that our schools can spend as much money and money whip whoever they want. It's just not going to work all the way down. It's going to be tiered. It just has to be because the sports don't survive if it's not tiered in some way. And that doesn't mean that they can't market themselves as an NIL, right? NIL will still be a thing. They can make NIL deals. I think that's a great equalizer, but I just don't see a world where the star quarterback and the third string soccer player are getting the same base salary. I just don't see that world.
Yeah.
Well, and it can't work because, kind of like you were saying, if you're taking the hit of 20 to 30 a year, it, they're just not going to do that. Like, you're just going to say, like,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to pack it up before we, run that red for that long. and then have to shut down the university. Like, and realistically, you're not going to shut down all your sports. So, like, something else is going to have to happen, right? It doesn't make dollars, so it doesn't make sense, right? It's just not going to happen. And so, whatever like we're thinking is the whatever we think the situation is now, it's just not sustainable. So that's not going to be the solution. Like whatever comes down as the decision, whatever comes down as the final ruling, it can't sustain itself, so it won't, right? There's only so long you could do that, maybe a couple of years before you're going to start seeing these, crazy headlines like, University of Florida shuts down athletics. And you're just like, what? There's no possible way that that's true, right? Florida's not going to shut down their athletics. These massive colleges aren't just going to shut down everything. So, like, there's going to be a different solution that comes from all of this. Maybe it turns into like shady money laundering stuff. Like that could be a possibility, but I don't think
Or
anyone
just
wants to
getting
live in that
really
world
desperate
either.
for new donors, like
Yeah,
just turning to, I don't know, like, does Saudi Arabia enter the chat
right.
for a couple schools that are
Well,
struggling and
and
just
does
say,
it turn into just like ad placement and everything? Like you're just gonna go
yeah,
fill up like the kind of like what they have on like the soccer stadiums in Europe, where you have like the rotating ads on the
Yeah.
screens, where it's just like constantly spinning around the field and like grabbing your attention and everything. Like, are we gonna do that? Because I kind of doubt that that will be something that's widely accepted. And so I just again, like I don't think it makes sense, and I don't think that it can happen, right? There's gonna have to be some separate solution besides this model that will go forward.
the ad revenue is one thing. I think the common fan is going to see it most in just their game day experience going
Mhm.
way, way more expensive.
Yep.
Parking is going to go up, tickets are going to go up, concessions are going to go up. And hopefully that doesn't price out the average fan. I really hope that doesn't, because that's what makes college football great. But are we going to have as big as student sections as we have right now? Or athletic department's going to look at that as a lost revenue because the
Well,
students aren't paying as much?
and the other side of that too is what does that do to the local communities? Because, so many of these colleges are running off of the game day weekends, right? It's the hotels getting their game days, it's the local restaurants getting the game day stuff. And if your demand starts going down because you're just like, yeah, I can't justify the ticket prices, then like their prices are going to have to go up too to stay in business, or else like communities crater. And so like I cannot see a world where all of this craters so badly that it's all just like crumbling. It's not sustainable, so it won't happen.
And
Well,
yeah,
he's what?
again, we are pro players getting what they
Yeah.
deserve, but it's what you deserve. Like, we live in a capitalist country still. The last time that I checked, I don't think that a universal salary for every NCAA athlete is sustainable at all.
And I don't think we don't know a ton of the details. They're just not public yet. But I don't think it would be any sort of blanket salary. I do think that there would be earning potential essentially, based on what your value is to the university. Right. At the end of the day, if we go to this, it does become performance based. You earn what you put out for the company. Right. And so there are going to be pluses and minuses with that. I think you're going to see, collectives like the Boulevard, like I can't remember the Raider Club or the Matador Club, whatever Texas, two of the collectives that were the first to roll out like blanket, hey, each athlete is going to earn this much money, uh, you know, given by sponsors and by donors. I think that's going to go by the wayside
Yeah,
because that's going to be
which is a good thing.
completely.
I
Yes,
think that's a good thing.
agreed. Agreed. It's going to be completely unsustainable. But I think you guys make great points. The game day experience is going to change. Ad revenue is going to change. All of a sudden, we're going to start having jersey patches. I feel like every other sports league has done it. It seems like that's a revenue source for them, and I think you could start seeing things like that
You know,
in
I
college
I,
game.
I do want to say just a little bit of a selfish thing for me. I would love to see some of those jersey patches, but like from the really really small companies, who like they've never made a patch before for anything, and so they're like, wait, let's put our logo that we designed in the '90s on this jersey because this is just like the small town company that's gonna sponsor the men's soccer team, right? Like I think that would be kind of funny to see what some of those jerseys would end up looking like, and I think kind of as a whole, it would be kind of a comedy of, just a catastrophe right there. Just wow, that jersey is hideous and I can't look away. It's one of the best things I've seen because it's so awful. So, maybe there's a little silver lining there.
Texas
Sure.
A&M tennis brought to you by the Dixie Chicken with the big old
Right.
rubber chicken logo.
Yeah.
Cer-
Yeah.
Certainly hasn't stopped some of these MLB jerseys from being created. Yikes.
Yeah.
Those are a tough watch. All right. Well, let us know what you think about the revenue sharing model. What's the best solution for college football, for competition, for you, the fan? Because I think it looks very different depending on what perspective you're asking from. At 3 Tech Pod, right in and let us know.
Gracious him. How about